This is Switzerland. You probably think you already know it. Snow peaks cut clean against a blue sky. Lakes hold entire mountain ranges upside down. Red trains cross stone bridges, so perfectly placed they seem designed for a photograph. The Matterhorn rises like a logo made by geology. Everything looks measured, polished, finished. But the Switzerland on the postcards is only the surface. Go beneath it, above it, and deep into the valleys between its mountains, and another country appears. A country built around obstacles. Here cliffs decide where villages can fit. Snow can decide whether a road exists for the day. A change of valley can mean a change of language. A glacier can erase a path, expose a slope, then force people to rethink what they thought was permanent. And still people connect one side to the other. They tunnel through mountains, they hang railways onto cliffs. They vote in open squares. They maintain walls laid down by generations they never met. They read snow before dawn because reading it badly can close an entire valley. Switzerland is small on a map, but it is not simple. It is compressed, vertical-vided, and stitched together again. That tension is the journey, not scenery alone, but the systems and decisions that make life possible inside the scenery. And somewhere beneath these mountains is the country's most extreme answer to the problem that has followed it for centuries. Not a road over the Alps, not a railway climbing them, a route that simply disappears beneath them. We'll come to it, because to understand why it exists, you first have to understand what the mountains have always demanded. Start with scale. 72 waterfalls descend through a valley, whose walls rise almost straight from the floor. At Jungfraujoch, a railway station stands 3,454 meters above sea level, the highest railway station in Europe, reached by a line that spends most of its final climb inside the Eiger and Mönch. Farther south, the Great Aletsch Glacier stretches for more than 20 kilometers, a moving river of ice and debris that has shaped the Alps and is now retreating fast enough for a lifetime to notice. Beneath the Matterhorn, Zermatt runs without ordinary private cars. On the slopes above Lake Geneva, people have spent centuries holding steep ground in place with terraces and walls. In the Jura, two towns were shaped around one obsession: measuring time. In Appenzell, citizens still gather in a square and raise their hands to vote. In Graubünden, Italian and Romansh occupy the same canton, and the language can change as sharply as the landscape. A railway across the Albula and Bernina lines uses tunnels, galleries, bridges, viaducts, loops, and curves to solve gradients that refuse to be reasonable. And in Basel, once a year, an entire city begins a ritual at 4 in the morning and follows it for exactly 72 hours. This is the version of Switzerland that disappears when the camera only looks for pretty mountains. The mountains are not scenery here. They are pressure. They push people apart. They force choices. And again, Switzerland answers with the same instinct: connect what the land has divided. Lauterbrunnen is a good place to feel that instinct before anyone explains it. The valley is narrow enough that the cliffs seem to stand over the roofs, not behind them. Water falls from hanging valleys high above, and in wind the thinnest streams break apart into mist before they reach the fields. Staubbach Falls drops close to 300 meters. From a distance it looks almost weightless, a white line trembling against dark rock. Up close the air cools. The sound changes with every step. Somewhere a bell moves through the grass, irregular and metallic, then disappears behind the low rush of water. Goethe came here in 1779, and Staubbach helped inspire his poem about spirits moving over water. The association makes sense. The falls seem less like objects than movements, water released from the plateau, wind catching it, gravity stretching it thin. But the deeper story is colder and slower. Glaciers once occupied this valley, carving the broad U-shape and leaving smaller side valleys hanging above the floor. When the ice retreated, the rivers remained high. Their water now falls through empty space. Fantasy on the surface, ice beneath it. People fit themselves into what is left. Roads, homes, pasture, rail, and paths occupy the narrow usable ground between steep walls. A worker crossing the valley in early morning does not see dramatic geography. He sees the route that is open, the slope that sheds water after rain, the place where winter shade lingers, the road that threads between rock and river. That is the Swiss pattern in miniature. Beauty and inconvenience are the same object viewed from different needs. In spring, meltwater swells the streams, and the valley turns greener almost by the day. In winter, the low sun leaves long sections in shadow, and ice holds to paths that looked harmless in summer. The walls do not change, but the way people move beneath them does. A school run, a maintenance job, a rail connection, a walk to a neighboring hamlet. All of it happens inside a landscape that sets the terms. Geography is not background here. It is scheduling. 40 waterfalls would already feel excessive. 72 turns the valley into a kind of vertical weather system. And still, trains arrive on time. Houses sit beneath cliffs, and daily life continues under terrain that never stops announcing its scale. This is Lauterbrunnen, where Switzerland first reveals how vertical it really is. And if living at the bottom of walls like these already requires adaptation, the next decision sounds almost unreasonable. Build a railway into the mountains themselves. The Jungfrau Railway begins with an idea that still feels slightly mad even after more than a century of proof. Climb toward the high Alps. Then stop trying to go around the mountain and enter it. The line reaches Jungfraujoch at 3,454 meters, where Europe's highest railway station sits between giants. The final railway is about 9 kilometers long, and roughly 7.6 kilometers of it run through tunnel inside the Eiger and Mönch. Think about that physically. Stone outside the carriage, stone above it, stone below it. The train moves through darkness on cogwheel track, while the mountain rises thousands of meters around you. Then a door opens, and the world becomes white. Construction began in the age of dynamite, drilling steam, ambitious investors, and very different ideas about what human engineering should attempt. The line finally reached Jungfraujoch in 1912. It is easy now to treat the ride as an attraction, because the machinery works so smoothly. That smoothness hides the labor. Men blasted rock in high-altitude conditions, worked through long tunnels, dealt with cold, thin air, logistics, and a mountain that offered no convenient building site. Even today, the experience is structured by engineering rather than scenery alone. Ventilation, power, tunnel maintenance, snow management, cogwheel systems, station operations, and the constant practical work required to keep a route functioning where ordinary roads cannot. High altitude changes simple tasks. Weather can turn in minutes. Ice forms where water finds a crack. Equipment must work in conditions that would shut down ordinary infrastructure. Somewhere behind the clean platform edges and bright viewing areas are technicians checking systems most passengers will never see. The railway feels effortless, only because the effort has been pushed out of sight. Facts first. 3,454 meters, 9 kilometers of railway, most of it in tunnel. A summit station operating year after year in one of Europe's most severe environments. Then the fact that changes the image. They did not simply climb the mountain. They hollowed out a path through its heart. Outside, the Aletsch region opens into a high world of ice, rock, and distance. Human ambition brings you here, but the landscape immediately makes that ambition look small again. This is Jungfraujoch, a place where a railway becomes a tunnel becomes a route to the sky, and the mountain remains larger than the achievement built inside it. Beyond those tunnels lies something older than every track and station, a river that moves without water. The Great Aletsch Glacier does not look fast. That is part of its power. From above, it seems almost fixed, a pale mass bending between mountains, dark medial moraines drawing long lines through the ice like brushstrokes. But a glacier is not a frozen lake. It flows. Snow accumulates at high elevation, compresses into ice, and gravity pulls that ice downhill. Rock caught beneath and within it grinds against the valley. Debris travels for years, crevasses ope close and migrate. The glacier reshapes the land while appearing, to a visitor standing still, almost motionless. Aletsch is the largest and longest glacier in the Alps, extending more than 20 kilometers through the UNESCO-listed Jungfrau Aletsch region. Its scale is easy to describe and hard to feel until a person enters the frame. Then the person becomes a dot. Yet the most important line in the landscape is not where the ice is. It is where the ice used to be. Darker rock, freshly exposed ground, shifting vegetation, and old moraines mark earlier positions. Climate change here is not an abstract graph. It is absence made visible. Researchers measure the retreat. Communities watch trails and slopes change. Visitors return years later and notice that viewpoints frame less ice than they remember. New ground appears where no soil existed in living memory. Pioneer plants arrive first. Then shrubs and young trees begin a slow succession on surfaces the glacier uncovered. Streams find different channels. Unstable slopes can demand new attention. The map does not change dramatically in a day, but a decade can redraw what seemed fixed. That is what makes a glacier such a strange clock. It measures climate by moving the edge of the world. The glacier is still enormous, and that is exactly why the retreat unsettles. Something this large should feel permanent. It is not. You can call it retreat. You can call it loss. Standing here, the word feels smaller than the thing itself. The air carries a cold edge even in sunlight. Meltwater moves below, somewhere far out on the ice, softened by distance. Then a small ordinary thing pulls the scale back down. Someone tightens a bootless beside the trail, checks the sky, and keeps walking. The mountain does not care that the century changed. The ice does. This is Aletsch, a place where the Alps show both the force that created them and the speed at which a familiar world can become unfamiliar. Ice shaped these mountains, but one peak would shape Switzerland's image of itself more than almost any other. Before sunrise in Zermatt, the most noticeable thing is what is missing. No ordinary private cars idle beneath apartment windows. No engine noise builds at an intersection. Instead, a small electric utility vehicle moves slowly over the street, its tires humming against the pavement. A worker stops, unloads supplies, closes a door, and continues before the main flow of visitors arrives. Footsteps sound sharper in the cold. Roof lines are still dark. Then above them, the Matterhorn appears. It is so familiar that the real mountain can feel strangely unreal. The isolated pyramid rising above the village, its ridges catching the first light, while the streets below are still blue with morning shade. The Matterhorn has become an international symbol of the Alps. But Zermatt beneath it operates according to local constraints. The village is car-free in the ordinary sense, relying on walking, electric vehicles, rail cable systems, and carefully managed access. Arriving by train changes the rhythm before you even see the mountain. Luggage moves differently. Deliveries are consolidated. Streets belong more to pedestrians. The absence of ordinary traffic makes small sounds audible. A suitcase wheel, bicycle freewheel, a cart reversing, church bells crossing the roofs. It is a transport rule, but it changes the sensory character of the whole settlement. That is not a decorative policy. In a narrow mountain settlement, movement is part of survival and part of atmosphere. The mountain also carries a long history of alpinism, but the daily relationship between people and peak is less heroic and more continuous. Guides watch conditions, lift crews monitor systems, maintenance teams work before visitors wake. Deliveries arrive by methods adapted to a village that chose not to organize itself around normal car traffic. Switzerland keeps finding ways around the mountain, sometimes over it, sometimes through it, and once, much later in this journey, almost impossibly far beneath it. For now, look back at the street. An electric cart turns a corner. A door opens, someone sweeps a step. Above all of it stands one of the most recognized mountains on Earth, but the village survives through 1,000 smaller decisions, no postcard records. This is Zermatt, where the famous view is only the backdrop. And the real story is how ordinary life is redesigned beneath an extraordinary peak. Now leave the high Alps for a slope where people did not merely adapt to the land. Over centuries, they rebuilt the surface itself. Lavaux descends toward Lake Geneva in steps. From a boat or the opposite shore, the terraces can look almost decorative, thin horizontal lines repeating across the slope. Up close, they are walls, paths, drainage, soil, stone, labor. The vineyard landscape has been shaped over centuries, with cultivation documented here since at least the Middle Ages, and the present pattern strongly tied to monastic development from the 12th century onward. A steep lakeside slope is not naturally convenient farmland. Soil moves downhill, water cuts channels. Walls access is difficult. So generation after generation divided the incline into smaller shelves, held them in place, and maintained a human geometry against gravity. Early light arrives from the lake and touches the stone before the upper paths warm. On a terrace, a worker lifts a loose rock from a wall and tests another for fit. No machine can make that decision as quickly as his hand. He adjusts it, steps back, presses the wall with his palm, then moves a few meters farther. That small action explains more than a panorama. Lavaux is not old because people built it once. It is old because people kept repairing it. Walk along the narrow paths and the scale changes every few meters. One wall is shoulder high, another disappears beneath vegetation. Steps squeeze between plots. Drainage channels carry runoff away before it can cut through the soil. From below, the terraces look geometric. From within them, they are a maze of practical compromises, each one answering the same problem. How do you keep a productive surface on a slope that wants to slide toward the lake? The walls absorb warmth, the lake moderates the local climate, and the terraces expose slopes to light. But none of those advantages eliminate maintenance. Rain still falls hard, roots still move soil. Stone still shifts, paths still need clearing. The landscape survives because work remains continuous. Switzerland is often associated with finished surfaces, but here the surface is never finished. It is inherited responsibility. One generation receives walls from the previous one and passes them forward only if it chooses to keep lifting stone. The view across Lake Geneva is wide, but the essential image is close. Fingers dusty with pale grit, a wall that holds because someone came back to it. This is Lavaux, landscape as inheritance, beauty maintained through repetition rather than preserved by accident. And farther north, another kind of landscape tells the same story. There, instead of shaping a hillside around labor, people shaped entire towns around the measurement of seconds. Winter light in La Chaux-de-Fonds is useful light. It enters large windows, falls across benches, and reaches hands doing work that can disappear beneath a fingertip. The city, and nearby Le Locle, developed around watchmaking so thoroughly that UNESCO describes their urban planning as shaped by and for the industry. Streets, workshops, orientation, rebuilding, and production formed a system. That is important because watchmaking is usually shown at the scale of an object. Gear springs, polished cases, a dial turning under glass. But precision begins much farther out. It begins with rooms positioned for light, workers living near workshops, transport, training, and an urban layout that allows thousands of tiny acts to become an industry. At a bench, a watchmaker lowers an eye toward a loop. Tweezers close around a component that would be easy to lose with one careless movement. The hand stops. Metal touches metal. Nothing dramatic happens. That is the point. A mechanism works because drama has been removed from the motion. Mechanical watchmaking and art mechanics were added to UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List in 2020, recognition not simply of luxury products, but of accumulated skill. That skill is learned through repetition that can look almost invisible from outside. How firmly do you hold a tool? How much pressure is too much? How do you hear or feel that a mechanism is not seated correctly? These are not questions answered by a skyline. They pass from instructor to apprentice, from bench to bench, and from one generation of hands to the next. Here, Switzerland's reputation for precision becomes physical. Not a slogan, training, light, muscle memory, patience. The city outside reflects the same logic. Streets run through a high Jura landscape shaped by snow and industrial history. Buildings carry the memory of workshops and rebuilding after fire. Time here is not an abstraction. Someone assembles it by hand. Then the emotional intensity recedes, as it should. A chair scrapes lightly on the floor. A small tool returns to a tray. Outside, a bus passes an intersection and disappears into winter haze. This is La Chaux-de-Fonds, a city where the smallest movements helped shape the largest plan. If this is already a different Switzerland from the one you expected, tell me which place changed your picture of it first. Because the next place takes an idea Switzerland is famous for. See, democracy, and gives it a form so physical you can watch it happen in a square. A hand rises in Appenzell, then another. On the last Sunday, in April in Appenzell Innerrhoden, citizens gather outdoors for the Landsgemeinde, a cantonal assembly whose tradition reaches back centuries. There is no need to turn this into a romantic symbol of perfect democracy. It is more interesting as a living mechanism. People stand together, proposals are presented, citizens can speak. The phrase associated with the floor is simple, the word is free. Votes are decided by raised hands, judged from the square. In an age of hidden interfaces, mailed ballots, digital systems, and distant institutions, the scene feels almost startlingly direct. Politics becomes bodies occupying the same space. But Appenzel's relationship with collective tradition extends beyond the square. Each year, during the alpine pasture season, cattle, sheep, and goats are moved between lower farms and high summer pastures, a practice UNESCO recognized as intangible cultural heritage in 2023. In the Alpstein, the movement is heard before it is fully seen. Bells approach along a road. Hooves strike pavement, then softer ground. Farmers walk beside the animals, guiding the procession uphill toward grass that will only be available for part of the year. The custom is beautiful, but it is also work. Fences need checking, weather changes quickly. Animals must be watched. The movement uphill is only one moment in a season of labor, repairing routes, monitoring animals, carrying supplies, judging grass, watching clouds build over the Alpstein. A procession may last a morning. The responsibility lasts for months. That difference matters because it keeps the tradition from becoming costume. What visitors see as ceremony is attached to a working calendar shaped by altitude. The calendar is not determined only by a date. It is determined by grass, snow, altitude, and the condition of the route. That is how culture becomes environmental knowledge. A tradition survives because it remains useful enough to repeat. Appenzel also gives us the second callback to the question we planted at the beginning. Here, distance is answered by gathering in one square. But Switzerland's greatest physical barrier cannot be solved by gathering. The Alps still divide north from south, valley from valley, weather from weather. Soon we will reach the country's most radical answer to that problem. First, though, we need to understand the force that made such an answer necessary. Because in winter, the mountain does not merely slow travel. Sometimes it decides where travel can happen at all. This is Appenzell, where citizenship, season, and altitude still meet face to face. In Davos, snow is studied because beauty is not a sufficient description of it. Snow has layers, weight, temperature gradients, crystal forms. Wind can move it from one slope to another and build dangerous slabs far from where the flakes originally fell. A surface that looks smooth can hold a fracture line waiting for the right pressure. Switzerland's avalanche risk management, together with Austria's, is recognized by UNESCO as intangible cultural heritage because the knowledge is not confined to laboratories. It passes through communities, guides, mountain workers, forecasters, engineers, and public institutions. Near Davos, the WSL Institute for Snow and Avalanche Research turns that inherited attention into systematic science. Before sunrise, a researcher cuts into a snow profile. The shovel scrapes through packed layers. A radio clicks once, wind moves loose crystals across the surface. Nothing else, there is information in that quiet. Grain size, temperature, a buried weak layer. The final forecast may influence roads, ski areas, construction, rescue readiness, and whether access to a valley remains open. Switzerland protects communities with more than forecasts. Avalanche barriers hold high on exposed slopes. Their repeated steel lines can look almost unnatural against a white mountainside. But each row exists because someone has modeled what the slope can release and where that snow might travel. In other places, protective forests do quiet work year after year, their trunks disrupting flow before it gathers full force. A road tunnel may be obvious engineering. A hillside planted and managed for protection is easier to miss, even though it can matter just as much. Forests stabilize terrain. Dams and deflection structures redirect moving snow. Galleries shield roads and railways. Authorities close routes. Controlled reduce unstable accumulations. Spatial planning determines where building is allowed. Weather becomes architecture. This is one of the places where the Swiss relationship with mountains is most honest. The Alps are admired, marketed, climbed, photographed. They are also monitored because they can kill. Experience matters, but experience is not myth. It is tested against measurements, models, observation, and memory. A forecaster cannot afford to be impressed by a beautiful slope. He has to ask what is inside it. That question prepares us for the journey's turning point. For centuries, the Alps decided who crossed Switzerland, where they crossed, and when. Passes open and closed snow-redirected trade. Gorges narrowed movement into dangerous corridors. Then Switzerland built an answer so extreme that many travelers barely notice the mountain above them. This is Davos in winter, where survival begins with learning to read what looks blank. Long before trains moved beneath the Alps, travelers approaching the Gotthard faced a different world of crossings. The Schellenen Gorge near Andermatt, water, road, and history into a narrow passage. The Reuss cuts through dark stone. Routes cling to the gorge because there are few alternatives. Stories grew around these crossings because difficult geography invites myth. William Tell belongs to that landscape of Swiss memory. The legendary archer, the apple, resistance to foreign rule, the founding story retold until symbol becomes more familiar than evidence. Swiss historical sources treat Tell as legend rather than a securely documented historical person, with the story appearing in written form in the late Middle Ages. The distinction matters. Myth explains how people wanted to imagine freedom. Engineering explains how they later moved through the same terrain. For centuries, the Gotthard route meant going over the Alps or through increasingly ambitious tunnels as technology advanced. Then the scale changed. The Gotthard-based tunnel runs for about 57 kilometers beneath the Massif and entered regular service in 2016. It is the longest railway tunnel in the world. Its construction took roughly 17 years. The route creates a flatter rail crossing through the Alps, allowing passenger and freight trains to move beneath mountains that once controlled the rhythm of travel above them. This is the place we have been moving toward since the beginning. Not a road over the Alps. Not a train fighting for elevation. A railway that disappears into the mountain and stays underground for a distance long enough to change your sense of where you are. Think of the construction physically. Excavation faces far below the surface, survey lines that must meet with extreme precision, rock temperatures, ventilation, emergency systems, power, concrete, rails, signals, and thousands of workers connecting spaces that begin as darkness. 57 kilometers. Passenger trains. Freight trains, a lower gradient alpine crossing. Dry facts, then the charged one. Above you is a mountain range. Around you is darkness. And Switzerland is moving through it at railway speed. The tunnel does not erase the Alps. It accepts the barrier so completely that the solution becomes subterranean. Passengers may spend much of the crossing looking at a carriage interior, but that ordinary experience is itself the achievement. A journey that once depended on exposed passes can now feel almost uneventful. Engineering has turned an alpine obstacle into a period of darkness between two landscapes. That is the answer to the question we planted at the start. How do you hold together a country divided by mountains? Sometimes you connect underneath them. A worker once stood underground here with stone in front of him, and a survey point somewhere beyond it. Today, a train enters one portal and emerges on the other side of the Alps. This is Gotthard, Switzerland disappearing beneath the mountains to remain connected above them. After Gotthard, the Rhaetian Railway feels almost playful, but only because its engineering is visible. The Albula and Bernina lines solve the Alps not by drilling one enormous low route beneath them, but by bending movement around the landscape in hundreds of smaller decisions. The Albula line runs about 67 kilometers and includes 42 tunnels and galleries, along with 144 bridges and viaducts. The Bernina line runs about 61 kilometers, with 13 tunnels and galleries and 52 bridges and viaducts. Those numbers sound like infrastructure inventories until a red train appears on the Landwasser viaduct, crosses a stone arc high above the valley floor, and then seems to drive directly into a cliff. The line climbs through loops, curves, tunnels, and changing gradients, reaching more than 2,250 meters near Ospizio Bernina. At some points, the engineering becomes almost theatrical. The train enters a tunnel facing one direction and emerges higher on the same mountainside after curling through rock. Elsewhere, stone arches carry the line over ravines with no attempt to hide the structure. The railway does not pretend the route is easy. It lets you see the negotiation between wheel, gradient, stone, and empty space. Snowfields open, forests close around the track, and villages appear for a few minutes before the line bends away again. The view changes because the route never stops solving the mountain. A straight line would be simpler. The mountain refuses simplicity, so the railway lengthens the route in order to gain height. It loops inside stone, it curves across slopes, it uses viaducts to hold an alignment in empty air. UNESCO recognizes the Albula and Bernina landscapes not just for technical achievement, but for the way railway and mountain environment were integrated, and for how the lines reduced isolation in alpine communities. That last point matters. The train is famous because it looks good from outside. Its deeper importance is ordinary mobility. A local passenger watches familiar villages pass. A conductor closes a door, checks the platform, and gives the small signal that sends the train onward. No climax now, no attempt to outdo Gothard, just a red carriage moving steadily through snow and forest, doing what railways are supposed to do, connecting places. This is the Rhaetian Railway, a route that refuses the straight line because the Alps refuse it first. And after so much effort to cross, drill, bend, reinforce, and connect the mountains, Switzerland keeps one place according to an almost opposite rule. Their intervention is deliberately limited. Fallen trees stay fallen. Erosion remains part of the story. The mountain is allowed to continue without being optimized. A branch moves once in the wind inside the Swiss National Park. Somewhere above the trail, small stones slip down a slope and stop. No bell. No drilling. In a country famous for managing terrain, this absence feels deliberate because it is. Established on the 1st of August 1914, the Swiss National Park is the oldest national park in the Alps. Its protection philosophy is strict. Natural processes are given room to proceed with minimal human interference. Trees die and remain part of the forest cycle. Avalanches reshape slopes, erosion moves material. Animals follow patterns that are not arranged for visitors. The contrast with the previous stops is almost perfect. At Jungfraujoch, humans tunnel upward. At Gothard, they tunnel through. On the Rhaetian Railway, they loop around. Here, the achievement is restraint. A trail enters larch and pine, opens onto dry alpine grass, then climbs toward bare stone. The only repeated mechanical sound may be the click of trekking poles. Beyond the park, the Lower Engadin adds another kind of preservation. Graubünden is Switzerland's only canton with 3 official cantonal languages: German, Romansh, and Italian, and Romansh remains especially present in parts of this region. Village name shift, speech changes. A greeting can carry a history older than the nation-state around it. In one village, children may encounter Romansh in school and German in wider media. In another valley, Italian becomes ordinary. These languages are not museum labels pinned to regions. They are tools people use to argue, joke, work, raise families, fill out forms, and decide what home sounds like. Their daily use is what keeps multilingualism alive. A language survives less through ceremony than through Tuesday morning. On one wall, a blue enamel sign reads Via Maestra. Then the trail continues, and the detail is left behind. There are places where translation helps, and places where perhaps it removes something. Switzerland's multilingualism is often summarized as 4 national languages, but the lived reality is not a tidy chart. It is schooling, administration, family speech, signs, radio, habit, identity, and sometimes the awareness that a language survives because people continue choosing it. The park does the same thing in another register. It protects not by freezing the landscape, but by allowing change to occur without constant correction. This is the Engadin, where one of Europe's most engineered countries makes room for what cannot be improved by engineering. Our final stop leaves the mountains almost completely. It takes us to a city at 4 in the morning, when the lights go out and order changes shape. At 4 a.m. in Basel, darkness becomes part of the ceremony. Street lights in the old city go out. The crowd waits, then lanterns appear, and glowing from within. Piccolos begin. Drums answer. The sound advances through narrow streets before you can always see where it comes from. Basel Fastnacht lasts exactly 72 hours, beginning on the Monday after Ash Wednesday, and UNESCO added it to the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2017. Abroad as controlled, quiet and orderly, Fastnacht seems at first like the opposite. Masks, satire, music, crowds, confetti, movement through the night. But look longer and another pattern appears. This is not disorder without structure. Groups prepare for months, lanterns carry themes, cliques rehearse, routes, traditions, costumes, drumming, piccolo playing, and social codes are learned and passed forward. Satire is part of the atmosphere, so the city also turns current events and local frustrations into images that move through the streets. The ritual is old, but its subjects are not trapped in the past. Each year absorbs the present, mocks it, exaggerates it, then carries it under lantern light. Tradition stays alive by refusing to become merely historical. The city becomes strange according to rules the participants understand. Even the darkness has a function. With electric street lighting removed, the painted lanterns become the architecture of the first minutes, turning familiar facades into moving walls of color. People lower their voices before the signal. Then the first notes cut through the old streets with startling force. A child walks beneath a lantern larger than his shoulders. An older drummer keeps the rhythm without looking down. People who spend most of the year moving through these streets as commuters, shopkeepers, students, office workers, and neighbors now occupy them as performers and audience at the same time. The mountain landscapes are absent, yet the national theme remains. Switzerland keeps creating ways for separate people to belong to the same system without becoming identical. In Appenzell, hands rise in a square. In Graubünden, languages continue side by side. In Basel, 72 hours of ritualized disruption fit inside a city known for institutions, industry, and schedules. The contradiction is the point. A country can value precision and still make room for masks. It can value quiet and still play drums before dawn. It can be organized enough to schedule its own release from normal order. Near the end of the night, a piccolo line turns a corner and briefly fades. Paper confetti sticks to damp stone. Someone adjusts a lantern strap. This is Basel, and this too is Switzerland. Now pull the journey together without reducing it to a list. The cliffs of Lauterbrunnen, the tunnels of Jungfraujoch, the retreating ice of Aletsch, the car-free streets of Zermatt, the stone terraces of Lavaux, the watchmaking towns of the Jura, the open vote in Appenzell, the avalanche forecasts of Davos, the darkness beneath Gotthard, the loops of the Rhaetian Railway, the protected quiet of the Engadin, the drums of Basel. They all answer the same pressure in different ways. Switzerland is a country where geography creates separation. Mountain chains divide watersheds and weather. Valleys turn toward different neighbors. Snow closes passes. Distance on a map lies about distance on the ground. Language changes across regions that are geographically close but historically distinct. The remarkable thing is not that these differences disappeared. They did not. The remarkable thing is how much energy has been spent making connection possible without flattening everything into sameness. A tunnel connects north and south, but does not remove the mountain. A multilingual canton governs across languages without requiring one of them to vanish first. An alpine pasture tradition survives because people still move with the season. A national park protects change by refusing to manage every outcome. An outdoor assembly turns politics back into visible bodies. A railway follows the shape of the land rather than pretending the land is flat. Switzerland works not because its differences disappeared. It works because generations learned how to cross them. That is the thread beneath the polished image. The country's famous precision is not perfection. It is response to slope, response to winter, response to distance, response to many communities living close together but not living the same way. Sometimes the response is technical, sometimes political, sometimes cultural. Sometimes the wisest response is to leave a place alone. And there is a cost behind nearly every answer. Tunnels require decades of planning and years underground. Terraces survive through maintenance. Mountain safety depends on people who study conditions before others wake. Minority languages continue because communities keep using them even when a larger language would be easier. Connection is not a natural state here. It is work, repeated until it begins to look normal. The map is small, the solutions are not, so when the Matterhorn appears again, it looks different. It is still beautiful, but beauty is no longer the whole story. The red train crossing a bridge is not just an elegant line through snow, it is access. The terrace above Lake Geneva is not simply a pattern on a hillside. It is maintenance handed down through generations. The tunnel beneath Gotthard is not merely a record. It is a national instinct carved into rock. When the land separates, find a way through. Even the quiet changes meaning. In the national park, quiet is restraint. In Davos, before an avalanche forecast, quiet is attention. In Basel, before 4 a.m., quiet is the second before thousands of people begin to play. There is no single Switzerland hidden behind the postcard. There are many, held close together by rail, road, law, habit, memory, and the decision to keep communicating across differences. Perhaps that is the Switzerland worth remembering. Not the country where everything is perfect, but the country that became extraordinary. Because so little of its geography was easy. The mountains gave the country its most famous images, but they also imposed its oldest problems. The answer was never one grand solution. It was accumulated across centuries. A wall rebuilt, a route cleared, a vote taken in public, a language taught to a child, a forecast issued before dawn, a tunnel driven 1 meter farther into stone. Thank you for traveling with me. If there is another place you think the world has misunderstood, leave its name below, and I'll see you on the next journey.